in support of Syrian government forces has been the Su-30SM twin-seat multi-role heavy fighter, which, although designed primarily for the air combat role, proved equally effective in the fighter-bomber role. The Su-30 design dates back to the late 1980s, with the first flight being made in 1989. The original intent was to take advantage of the Su-27's tremendous range and payload potential that was limited by the exhaustion a single crew member experienced during lengthy missions, which, thanks to aerial refueling, could last into several hours. Adding a second crew member would reduce the pilot's workload considerably and, moreover, enable the crew to handle a wider array of weapons and sensors. The addition of the NO-11 bar's active phased array radar, capable of detecting and tracking aerial, ground and naval targets, also meant that the twin-seat Su-30 could perform some of the missions usually handled by aerial early warning aircraft, namely control of the airspace and the direction of friendly aircraft to their targets. The collapse of the USSR meant that the Su-30's entry into service would be greatly delayed, as the technologies necessary to fully utilize its potential would not be available until the early 2000s. Moreover, the reduction in the number of combat aircraft meant that each plane would now have to carry out multiple functions. It meant that the days of specialized fighters, attack aircraft and bombers were coming to an end, as evidenced by the fact that all the late-model MiG and Su aircraft have multi-role capabilities. The Su-30 was not an exception. The Su-30M2, which began entering Russian fighter regiments in 2010, and the Su-30SM, which followed 2 years later, can use a wide range of unguided and guided air-to-ground weapons, including medium-range air-to-surface missiles like the Kh-29 and Kh-59, and satellite-guided bombs, in addition to the full array of advanced air-to-air weapons, including the RVV-SD active radar homing missile, which is often seen carried by Su-30SMs and Su-35s over Syria, as insurance against NATO fighters' interference. The Su-30 also proved to be a remarkable export success. It turned out that many countries around the world, including India, China, Malaysia, Venezuela, Indonesia, Uganda, Vietnam, Kazakhstan and Algeria, also had a need for a powerful long-range fighter aircraft capable of handling a wide range of missions, and could not afford to procure equivalent Western aircraft, such as the F-15. Since many of these countries participate in joint exercises with Western air forces, these exports made it possible to evaluate the Su-30 against its contemporaries. It is a testimony to the basic Sukhoi design that the addition of the second crew member and the expansion of its capabilities did not affect its original air-to-air mission, for the Su-30 has excelled whenever pitted against Western aircraft, such as the F-15, F-16, FA-18 and the Eurofighter Typhoon. There are no indications that the Su-30 has ever faced the fifth-generation F-22 in such matchups, but even though the US fighter is on paper more modern than the Sukhoi design, the outcome of such a matchup would be a far from foregone conclusion. It is entirely possible that the Su-30 could defeat the F-22, whose flaws and limitations have been carefully kept out of the public view, thanks to a combination of passive infrared detection devices that are particularly effective against fast-flying high-altitude targets, which tend to present a strong infrared signature against the background of cold sky, and a comprehensive electronic countermeasures suite comparable to that mounted on the Su-34 bomber. With a total of 116 Su-30 aircraft currently in service or on order for the Russian airspace forces and naval aviation, and several hundred more aircraft in use around the world, it is clear that the Su-30 will remain a major workhorse for decades to come, even though it may be overshadowed in Russian service by the Su-35 and the Tu-50. The basic design still retains considerable modernization potential. India, which is the largest Su-30 user with over 200 aircraft, is in negotiations with Sukhoi concerning a multi-billion-dollar modernization project for its Su-30 MKI fleet that would include making the aircraft stealthier and equipped with an internal weapons bay. Russian service Su-30s are likely to receive upgrades incorporating Su-35 and even T-50 technologies and systems.
Russian media reported in recent weeks 2 new developments concerning the PAK-FA, or the Future Aviation System of Frontal Aviation. In addition to the news of the 6th T-50 prototype taken to the air and 5 additional ones being in advanced stages of construction, the Russian media reported that the T-50 would enter service with the Russian Aerospace Forces already in 2017, in other words, in little more than a year. The aircraft series production would commence the same year. It is quite a milestone for this highly ambitious aircraft program that began comparatively recently in 2001, when the Ministry of Defense issued its final list of specifications for the aircraft, though preliminary research on the prospective successors to the Su-27 and MiG-31 fighters was launched already in the 1980s. These specifications included super maneuverability comparable to, if not better than, displayed by the Su-27, super cruise, or the ability to travel at supersonic speeds without the use of afterburner, multi-role capabilities including the ability to engage air, land, and naval targets with a wide spectrum of long-range guided munitions, advanced electronic suite in the form of an active phase array radar with near 360-degree coverage thanks to the side and aft-looking aerials and so-called glass cockpit that allows the pilot to avoid being overwhelmed by information, and of course stealth or low observability in both active and passive sense of the word, with the T-50 being able to engage targets without the use of its own onboard radar. Contrary to much negative propaganda emanating from Sukhoi's Western competitors, the T-50 project development turned out to be smoother than many anticipated, largely thanks to the parallel evolution of the Su-27 family of aircraft, which was used to test and improve new technologies before incorporating them into the T-50. In that respect, it may well be that Sukhoi has taken over from Lockheed Martin as the world's foremost fighter aircraft design bureau, as the long list of developmental problems experienced by both the F-22 and F-35 programs suggests that its design culture was disrupted by the multiple defense mergers of the 1990s. Which means that, whereas the T-50 stands on the shoulders of the Su-27 family, the F-35 is being designed as if it were the first product of a newly constituted design bureau. The planned 2017 service entry date will only be another milestone in the life of the T-50 program, with many to follow. The initial frontline squadron aircraft will most likely be narrowly capable air combat machines, just as the initial Su-27 fighters were. It will simply be the spear tip of a new era of Russian military aviation. However, just as the Su-27 spawned the Su-30, 33, 34 and 35, which now collectively comprise the backbone of the Russian Aerospace Forces, the T-50 will similarly acquire new capabilities and serve as the springboard for spin-off models, so that in a few decades' time the T-50 will be the backbone of the Aerospace Forces, likely supplemented by smaller MiG fighters, combat drones, and possibly even the 6th generation fighter. The only unknown aspect of the program is its service designation, for the T-50 will surely acquire a SU designation upon being accepted into service. Fully implementing the T-50's capabilities will also require the development of a new range of munitions capable of taking advantage of the design's internal weapons bays. Even though the T-50 can carry older ordnance under wing, it is also evident that a range of weapons is under development. An example of such munitions is the KH-59 Mk2, a derivative of the KH-59 missile family that was demonstrated at the MAX 2015. This new modification, which combines stealth, 300 km range, 300 kg warhead, and a variety of guidance systems enabling it to engage both stationary and mobile land and sea targets, is indicative of the nature of the T-50's future arsenal. While no single weapon system is in and of itself decisive, the T-50's imminent service entry undermines one of the crucial NATO assumptions, namely that of air superiority. Even the initial small fleet of T-50s backed up by the Su-35 and Su-30 fighters would be enough to deprive NATO's land forces of the ability to operate without worrying about attack from the air. Given how unused and unprepared NATO is to operate in the face of opposing air power,